A family built on faith. A husband, a wife, and their son, living what seemed to be a life of devotion, trust, and unwavering belief. In their quiet Texas town, the man at the center of it all wasn't just a father. He was a leader, a shepherd to his congregation, a voice of guidance, a man people turned to when they needed answers, when they needed hope, a man whose words could move a room, whose prayers could lift spirits, whose presence alone could bring comfort to those who sought it. But inside the walls of his own home, behind the sermons, beyond the Sunday services, and away from the watchful eyes of his followers, something else was happening. Something no one was supposed to see. Something no one was supposed to know. That is, until the night everything changed. The night his wife walked in. The night she saw it for herself. And the night she made a decision that would leave an entire community in shock. A gunshot, a fire, and the shattered remains of a family that had once seemed untouchable. Was this the desperate act of a mother pushed beyond her limits? A crime of passion? Or was there something more to the story? Something hidden? Something no one wanted to acknowledge? A respected pastor, a devoted wife, a dark family secret that led to murder. What really happened tonight, everything fell apart. And when the truth came out, it left more questions than answers. Faith, trust, family, these were the pillars of the Richardson household. In a quiet Texas town, Pastor Jonathan Richardson was more than just a man of God. He was a leader, a mentor, a husband, a father. His sermon spoke of love and forgiveness, of righteousness and devotion. To his congregation, he was a guiding light. To his wife, Amanda, he was a man she had built her life around. To their 16-year-old son, Caleb, he was a father who set the rules, who preached discipline, who carried the weight of expectation on his broad shoulders. But what happens when a man who stands in the pulpit, the man who claims to speak for God, hides something far more disturbing behind the doors of his own home? What happens when trust is broken, not by words, but by actions so unthinkable they destroy everything in their path? On the night of October 12th, the Richardson home stood still in the dark, the glow of streetlights casting long shadows through the windows. Amanda had been out for the evening, nothing out of the ordinary. She had spent the day running errands, preparing for the weekend, thinking about the Sunday service that was just days away. But when she returned home, something felt off. The house was quiet, too quiet. No footsteps, no hushed voices, nothing but the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant chirp of crickets outside. And then she saw it, a light seeping from beneath a closed door, her bedroom door. She took a step forward, then another. Her heart was steady, until it wasn't, until she heard something, a muffled sound, a whisper, a breath. Her fingers curled around the doorknob. She turned it, and in that instant, whatever love she had left for her husband, whatever faith she had in their marriage, whatever trust she had in the man she had vowed to spend her life with collapsed. There, standing in the dim glow of the bedside lamp, was Pastor Jonathan Richardson, his pants pulled around his ankles. And kneeling before him was Caleb. For a moment, the world stood still. The walls seemed to close in. The air became thick, suffocating. Every memory, every sermon, every whispered, "I love you," all of it disintegrated under the weight of what she was seeing. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. And then rage. A blinding, uncontrollable fury erupted inside of her, boiling over with years of devotion, sacrifice, and blind faith that had led her straight into a nightmare. She didn't remember reaching for the gun. She didn't remember pulling the trigger. But when the deafening crack of gunfire echoed through the house, she saw him fall. She saw the shock in his eyes, the slow collapse of his body, the way his hand reached for something, anything, before slumping onto the hardwood floor. But she wasn't finished, because the image of what she had seen, the horror of what had been happening behind closed doors, maybe for years, wasn't something she could simply erase. She needed to destroy it. She needed to burn it down. The flames spread quickly, devouring everything in their path. Smoke billowed into the night sky, swallowing the home that had once been a sanctuary. By the time the sirens wailed in the distance, by the time the fire trucks roared onto the scene, there was almost nothing left. Nothing except the body. and a boy who would never be the same again. But when the truth came out, when investigators pieced together the final moments of Pastor Jonathan Richardson's life, one question remained. Was this justice? Or had Amanda Richardson just become the very thing she feared the most? A family built on faith, a town that believed in them, a man who preached salvation from the pulpit, his voice ringing through the walls of the church like a force of nature. Pastor Jonathan Richardson wasn't just a spiritual leader. He was a pillar of his community, the man people turned to in their darkest moments. He had the kind of presence that commanded attention, a voice that filled a room, a smile that made you believe in something greater than yourself. And standing by his side, his wife, Amanda, for years, she had played the role of the devoted pastor's wife, the woman who stood in the front pew, had bowed in prayer, the woman who helped organize charity events, who greeted newcomers with warm embraces, who taught Bible study classes to young wives on how to build a godly home. And then there was Caleb, their son, a teenager growing up in the shadow of a father who demanded obedience, a boy taught to respect the word of God above all else. To the outside world, the Richardsons were the embodiment of righteousness, a family united in faith, bound by love, untouched by the corruption of the world around them. But appearances can be deceiving, because behind closed doors, away from the adoring eyes of the congregation, away from the Sunday morning sermons and the whispered prayers, the reality was much different. And on one unassuming night, in the stillness of their Texas home, Amanda saw the truth for herself. She saw it with her own eyes, and she made sure no one else ever would. For more than a decade, Pastor Jonathan Richardson stood at the helm of New Grace Fellowship, a modest but growing church nestled in the heart of Texas town. His sermons weren't just spoken, they were felt. They carried weight. They moved people. In a town where faith was everything, Pastor Richardson was a symbol of righteousness. His words could bring grown men to tears. His presence could silence a room. He was the man people called when they needed guidance, when they needed hope. And at his side, Amanda. She was the epitome of a pastor's wife, poised, gracious, ever smiling. She ran the church's charity drives, counseled struggling couples, led women's prayer groups. To many, she was more than just a pastor's wife. She was a mother figure, a friend, a source of strength. But what no one saw, what no one ever suspected, was that Amanda lived in fear. She had married Jonathan young, back when his charm had been intoxicating. His promises of a holy life seemed unbreakable. But as the years passed, something shifted. Jonathan was not the man people thought he was. Inside their home, his sermons of kindness and love meant nothing. His control over Amanda was absolute. What she wore, who she spoke to, how she spent her time. His word was law. His punishments were swift. And then there was Caleb, a quiet boy, reserved, obedient. The son of a pastor was expected to uphold a certain image, to walk in his father's footsteps. But Caleb wasn't like his father. He wasn't outspoken. He wasn't bold. He never challenged authority. And in the months leading up to the tragedy, something about him had changed. He grew more withdrawn, jumpy, restless, and Amanda noticed. But she never asked why. Not until the night she found out for herself. October 12th, a quiet evening. Amanda had spent the day running errands, preparing for an upcoming church event. She had dinner with a friend, lingered at the restaurant a little longer than usual, not realizing that the delay would soon lead her to the moment that would change everything. She arrived home late. The house was dark but not silent. She could hear something, a low murmur, voices, movement, then laughter, not the kind that comes from joy, not the kind that makes a house feel warm. Something was wrong. Her heart pounded as she walked through the hallway, her hand grazing the walls for balance. The closer she got, the louder it became. She stopped at the bedroom door. A sliver of light glowed from the gap beneath it. Her hand trembled as she reached for the handle. And when she pushed the door open, everything stopped. Her breath caught in her throat. Her mind struggled to process what her eyes were seeing. Jonathan, her husband, standing in front of their son, pants around his ankles. Caleb, frozen, terrified, unable to speak. For a moment, Amanda couldn't move. She couldn't think. Then rage. A white-hot fury unlike anything she had ever felt. She didn't remember grabbing the gun from the nightstand. She didn't remember aiming. She only remembered the sound. A single gunshot tore through the silence. Jonathan's body jerked. His eyes went wide with shock before his legs buckled beneath him, sending him crashing to the floor. But Amanda wasn't done. She wanted him gone. She grabbed a can of lighter fluid from a hallway closet, doused the floor, his clothes, the bed. The flames caught quickly, spreading across the room in hungry waves. By the time she stepped outside, watching the fire consume the life she had once built, she felt nothing. No grief, no guilt, just relief. Underscore. She When the fire department arrived, there was almost nothing left of the Richardson home. Inside, buried beneath charred wood and melted furniture, they found the remains of Pastor Jonathan Richardson, unrecognizable, burned beyond recognition. Amanda was arrested at the scene. She didn't run. She didn't resist. When the officers placed her in handcuffs, she didn't say a word. And Caleb was the only witness, the only one who knew why his mother had done it. But when investigators questioned Amanda, she didn't tell them the truth. She didn't tell them what she saw. Instead, she said 3 words. I had to. But had she? Had she acted in self-defense? Had she snapped? Or had she been planning this for far longer than anyone realized? As the investigation unfolded, as the evidence came to light, as Caleb finally broke his silence, one thing became clear. The truth was far more disturbing than anyone had imagined. A woman stands in the middle of the street, her face illuminated by the glow of a fire consuming everything behind her. The home she had lived in for years, the life she had built, the man she had once loved, all of it swallowed by the raging flames. Amanda Richardson doesn't cry. She doesn't scream. She doesn't move. The only sound piercing the night is the wail of approaching sirens, the distant shouts of neighbors emerging from their homes, their faces painted with confusion, fear, disbelief. Inside that burning house lies the body of Pastor Jonathan Richardson, the man who preached forgiveness, the man who led a congregation, the man who was lying on the bedroom floor, his blood soaking into the carpet when Amanda struck the match. A single question lingers in the thick, smoke-filled air. What did she see that night? And why did it push her to kill? Because to the rest of the world, Amanda wasn't a murderer. She was a devoted wife, a mother, a woman who had stood beside her husband for over a decade, helping him build his ministry, raising their son under the roof of faith and obedience. But something changed, something shattered. And when the truth came out, it wasn't just one family that was left in ruins. It was an entire town. What does it take to push someone beyond their breaking point? For years, Amanda Richardson had played the role of the perfect pastor's wife. She smiled in the front pew, bowed her head in prayer, welcomed members of the congregation with open arms. But beneath the surface, something had been building. Was it suspicion? Had she seen signs, hints, moments that didn't quite add up? Or had she buried them deep, convincing herself that Jonathan was the man everyone believed him to be? Experts who analyze the case suggest that Amanda's reaction, the sudden, uncontrollable rage, wasn't just about what she saw that night. It was about everything that had come before it. The years of control, the subtle but undeniable changes in her son. Withdrawn, anxious, avoiding his father's gaze. The way Jonathan's sermons had grown more intense, his warnings about obedience more forceful, his temper behind closed doors more volatile. Amanda wasn't just a woman who walked in on a betrayal. She was a woman who had ignored the whispers of her own instincts for far too long. And then she saw the truth. Psychologists who study crimes of passion call it trigger event, a moment so overwhelming that it wipes out logic, reason, hesitation. The mind doesn't process in words. It acts. It reacts. And that's exactly what Amanda did. But what about Jonathan? Had this been his first offense? Or was there something darker in his past? Investigators began to dig into Jonathan's life. Beyond the pulpit, beyond the congregation's praises, beyond the image he had so carefully crafted. And what they found was disturbing. There had been whispers. A church member, young, vulnerable, who had suddenly moved away with her family, without explanation. A former friend who recalled moments that had made them uneasy. Jonathan's fixation on scripture about obedience, about submission, about a man's authority over his household. Nothing concrete. Nothing that had ever been reported. But then there was Caleb, the boy at the center of it all. The boy who had been caught in the worst kind of nightmare. What happens to a child who grows up under that kind of control? What happens to a victim when the person they fear the most is also the person the entire world reveres? And most importantly, what did he say when the police finally asked? Because his words had the power to change everything. Amanda Richardson was arrested at the scene. She didn't resist. She didn't speak. And when detectives sat her down in the interrogation room and asked a question that everyone wanted answered, "Why did you kill your husband?" she said only 3 words. "I had to." But was it murder or was it justice? The prosecution wasted no time building their case. Amanda had shot an unarmed man. She had set fire to the crime scene, destroying evidence. She had left her own home engulfed in flames, with her husband still inside. They painted her as a woman who had snapped, who had taken justice into her own hands instead of calling the police. But the defense had a different argument. This wasn't premeditated. This wasn't calculated. This was a mother who walked in on a horror she could not process. This was a woman who reacted to a truth so unbearable, so vile, that it obliterated every rational thought in her mind. And most importantly, this was a man who had been hiding something for a long, long time. The courtroom was divided. Some saw Amanda as a murderer. Others saw her as a woman who did what any mother would do. But when Caleb took the stand, everything changed. For the first time, he spoke about the years of silence, the fear, the secrets he had been forced to keep. And when the jury heard his words, when they saw the look in his eyes, their decision became clear. But would the law see Amanda as a grieving mother or a killer? Because the verdict wouldn't just decide her fate. It would define how far a person can go when the truth is too unbearable to live with. This case is more than just a crime. It's a test of morality, justice, and human instinct. At what point does protection become vengeance? As we uncover the layers of Amanda Richardson's actions, we want to hear from you. What would you have done? On screen, you'll see a poll. Was this murder or self-defense? Click to cast your vote and see how others feel. Do you believe Amanda had no other choice? Or should she have handled it differently? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And as we move deeper into the legal battle and the emotional weight of this case, ask yourself, if the law doesn't protect the ones you love, how far would you go to protect them yourself? Amanda Richardson stood trial for the killing of her husband, Pastor Jonathan Richardson. The prosecution argued that her actions were deliberate. She shot him multiple times and set the house on fire. They claimed she could have called the police instead of taking justice into her own hands. The defense countered that Amanda acted in a moment of uncontrollable emotion after discovering her husband in a disturbing act involving their teenage son, Caleb. They argue it was a crime of passion, driven by a mother's instinct to protect her child. After intense deliberation, the jury convicted Amanda of voluntary manslaughter, not premeditated murder, but not justifiable homicide either. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison. The verdict divided the community. Some saw her as a murderer who deserved a harsher sentence. Others believed she was a mother who did what the system had failed to do, protect her son from an abusive man. News outlets covered the case extensively, with legal analysts debating whether justice had truly been served. Whispers of Jonathan's past behavior surfaced. Claims that some church members had noticed red flags but never spoke up. Caleb Richardson, the son at the center of the tragedy, disappeared from public view. Years later, he made a rare statement. "I lost both my parents that night. One to death, one to the system. But I don't blame her. I know why she did it, and I would have done the same thing." The case left lingering questions. Did Amanda deserve prison time? Was this justice or punishment? What would you have done in her place? A pastor, a wife, a son. From the outside, they were a picture of faith, devotion, and family. Behind closed doors, that image shattered in an instant. A gunshot rang out in the dead of night. A fire engulfed the home meant to be their sanctuary. And when the smoke cleared, one man was dead, one woman was in handcuffs, and a boy stood at the center of a story that would shake an entire town. Amanda Richardson didn't run. She didn't deny what she had done. But was she a murderer? Or was she something else entirely? As the truth unfolded, it forced an entire community to ask, what would you have done? Every family has its secrets. Some are harmless. Others can destroy lives. For years, Amanda Richardson lived with a man who was adored by his congregation, a man who preached about faith, love, and morality, a man who stood before his community every Sunday and spoke about righteousness. But what happens when the person who claims to be closest to God is hiding something unspeakable? How many times had Amanda overlooked the small signs, the unease in her son's eyes, the quiet hesitations, the fear that no child should have to carry? And when she finally saw the truth for herself, it was already too late. Or maybe, in her mind, it was the first moment she could finally do something about it. In that single fateful night, the weight of every unanswered question, every ignored instinct, every suppressed suspicion came crashing down. A mother acted, and a life was lost. But the question remains, was it justice? Secrets don't stay buried forever. They have a way of coming to the surface, whether we're ready for them or not. The tragedy of this case isn't just in the gunshots that ended Jonathan Richardson's life. It isn't just in the flames that turn a home into a crime scene. It's in the years that led up to that moment. The silence, the shame, the fear. If someone had spoken up sooner, could this have been prevented? If Amanda had seen the signs earlier, would she have made a different choice? Or was this always where the story was going to end? No one will ever know. But one thing is certain. A family was destroyed. A community was shaken. And a boy, once caught in the middle, was left to carry the weight of it all. Murder, or justice, premeditated crime, or a mother's breaking point. Amanda Richardson sits in a prison cell today, paying the price for what she did. But what if the system had failed her? What if, in that moment, she believed she was the only one who could stop the man who had betrayed them all? Would you have done the same? This case isn't just about a crime. It's about the choices we make in moments of unbearable truth. It's about the things we ignore, the warnings we dismiss, and the consequences of staying silent when we should speak. The law has given its answer. Now, we ask you, what would you have done? Tell us in the comments. Cast your vote. Join the conversation. And remember, not every crime is black and white. A gunshot in the dark, a house consumed by fire, a mother standing outside, staring into flames, knowing there was no turning back. Her husband, the man she had once promised to love and honor, was dead. To the world, Jonathan Richardson was a man of faith, a leader, a voice of guidance for his congregation. To his wife, Amanda, he was something else entirely. That night, when she stepped into their home, she saw the truth laid bare. And in that moment, everything changed. Was this a woman who lost control? Or was this a mother doing what no one else had done, stopping a monster before he could do any more harm? The jury had their answer. Now it's your turn. One crime, two sides of the story. A courtroom may have decided Amanda Richardson's fate. But the questions this case leaves behind are not so easily answered. Was she a murderer or a mother pushed her limit? Could this tragedy have been prevented? And most importantly, what would you have done? The debate continues in the comments below. Share your thoughts. Vote in the poll. Tell us, did the court get it right? And if this case left you questioning everything you thought you knew about justice, you won't want to miss what's coming next. In our next case, we uncover another shocking family tragedy, a story where the truth is even more complicated than the crime itself. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Because in the world of true crime, nothing is ever as simple as it seems.